Y'all, what is going on? What is going on? So, y'all, he had me back for a third time. To my surprise, y'all, we're back for episode 22 of
22,
the
22.
podcast, y'all. And today, as you can see by the title of this video, we're getting into a real touchy subject, y'all, because out here we think that carbs are the devil. And so we're here to debunk a lot of these myths, get down to the real nitty gritty, and see our carbs are really the worst thing that you can have in your diet while you're trying to lose weight and work on your wellness journey. So, y'all, if I'm sure at this point, you guys know who I am. I am Monique. Of course, Deion over here at Evolve Fitness. So we can really just kind of go ahead and hop right into it. Let's go ahead and see. So where do you want to start to even tackle this, Deion?
Okay. That's a good question. I think where we should at least touch base on, because it's gonna be some of everything. But
Yeah.
ultimately, I think the one thing that's super important is the fact of understanding what, like in a very general term of what our carbs are doing for us.
Yeah.
Because we're in a situation where a lot of people will get online and see different types of diets and things of that nature, or different tips and tricks on how to do things. And a lot of people, people will tell you like, hey, all carbs are bad carbs. And it's just like, well, you want to kind of explain what the carbs are as opposed to simple and complex carbs. But again, we're not going to get into anything specific. But what I'm
But the
saying
no
is
there levels to this thing when it
correct.
comes
There's literally levels to it all.
to
But ultimately, I think what I really want people to realize is that everything has its place. So most people know that protein, of course, is, the muscle sparing and also the muscle building aspect within your macros. Your fats, it still has to do more, I would say, more of hormonal. And then when it comes into your carbohydrates, would be your energy and recovery, and replenishing and also filling your muscles. So the carbohydrates with that thing in particular, yes, if you eat too much of anything, of course we're going to gain weight. But carbs gets a bad name because of the type of carbs that people eat. So, for example, being from the island, we eat a lot of rice and things of that nature. But everything in moderation is what I like to always tell everybody. I don't like to take anything out of the pot from anybody, because if this is the food that you're comfortable with eating when we first start, or when you're starting your own journey, stick with it, but cut the sizes. You know what I mean? So, we eat really, really big plates, from the island. We eat plates, you get what I'm saying? And we don't know any, we're going to eat this now and save some for later. You get what I'm saying? Like whatever's on that plate, whatever grandma put on that plate, you better eat it. You know what I mean? So, that's kind of the era that we come from, on that side with Haitian. So ultimately, what I always like to tell people to do is be mindful of the type of carbs. So get straight to it. All the sweets, all the refined carbs are the things that have, you know, added sugar. Or for example, you go into Publix, like we have Publix over here. I'm not sure if it's up there in Georgia. Yeah, okay. I
yeah.
think it's basically us too. I don't know if there's other states, but the thing with that is, like, I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I will go into Publix, right? And let's say
And
I'm
the
just gonna go in for some fruits. Huh?
public subs are nothing to play with when I tell y'all. Ooh.
Listen, don't get me started. Chicken cordon bleu, chicken tender sub. You know what I mean? So so you see, we love carbs, but the thing is
Get it. We get it. So it's
right.
like,
But
yeah.
you have to treat yourself every once in a while. That's fine. But if we consistently eat those carbs, that's when it becomes a problem, right? So I was just talking to, excuse me, two separate clients, and basically dealing with something that's called PCOS. So there's an imbalance, hormonally, where they tend to produce more testosterone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a correlation between like insulin resistance. So what happens is, basically what I'm saying is the type of carbs that you eat will tend to spike your blood sugars, at either for a short amount of time or a high, a longer period of time, depending on the person as well too. And of course, your nutrition and how you're eating or what you're consuming. So what happens is, with people that are insulin resistant for the most part, and people who have PCOS, since they're correlated, they'll eat something, those sugar levels will spike and they'll stay up. They're supposed to come down, but by the time that they're eating another meal, it's still here, which causes them to store a lot more fat. And usually it's in the abdominal area. So a lot of people tell, not everybody, but some people are like, yo, I just keep all of it here. I'm like, okay, well, what are you eating? And then I'm asking them, they're like, well, da 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 da. It's carbs, 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 carbs. I love bread. I love, so it's one of those things that I realized. I said, okay, let's start cutting some of it out and see how it works out for you. But just realize that although carbs, to me, I'm not saying all carbs are the same carbs, but certain carbs for people might be a little bit better, or less of a certain amount of carbs might be better for you. And just being able to experiment and seeing what works for you, I think is really important, because we get into this mode of people will go into a keto diet and think that a high fat, low carb is going to be perfect for them. It's not for everybody. You get what I'm saying? And also, a lot
Yeah.
of people don't realize what ketosis is. And it's a struggle. Like those first couple of days, it's like, okay, I got it. But then when you really start pushing through and you got to go to the gym, or you still have to work, or whatever the case is, not having carbs can affect people. And we're talking about, mentally, emotionally, because you got to think about it. When you're hangry, bruh, like it's a whole nother ball game. You know what I'm saying? So ultimately, what I was saying was, when I go into Publix, I'll look at those tables and I'm looking at all the pastries. I'm like, dang, those Heath Bar cookies look fire. But I know myself, because of the sugar that's in them, not even just the carbs, it's going to break me out. So I have to be very mindful of what I eat, how much I eat. So I always like to tell people, again, let me know what you're eating, and also be mindful of trying to eat the carbs that doesn't have a lot of added ingredients. So for example, if you're buying something that's carb based and you look on the back of it on the ingredients, I always tell people, if it's 3, 4, 5, 6 lines of stuff and it's things that you cannot pronounce, you might want to stay away from it. And that's where I'm
Right.
going to stop personally. So what's your insight on it? What's your insight?
You really touched a lot of important points, and I kind of want to take things back, way back to the beginning.
My bad.
But no, because I know we're so into this, society now, where it's like a lot of different diets and fads are coming at us all at one time. Diets and fads are not new things for us. When it came to the whole fat versus carbs, that debate happened decades ago. Like back, when everybody's mom was on that Atkins diet, that was like the first had like a real, I guess, quote unquote keto program. Keto is not itself, is not even like a new concept. It was just remastered to be what it's known to be today. But the Atkins diet was like the first time we had a plan where it's like people were figuring that fat makes you fat. So I guess that's kind of like a little bit afterwards. Just between the fats and carbs, two different topics, y'all. We'll get into the fat conversation on a different day. But, at one point it was like fats make you fat. So try, eat more carbs. And that's like, after World War II, started to kind of go, get a little bit heavier on the carb intake, started to kind of peak into a more like, obesity crisis. Then science tells us, okay, maybe fats, maybe carbs aren't the way to go. Let's try to cut down the carbs and go more towards the fat size of it. But exactly what Deion has said earlier, fats are literally your energy source. And kind of break it down, like carbs kind of come into 3 different forms of its compounds. You have your sugars, your starches, and your fibers. So like you said, all carbs are not made the same. You can think of it as like white, brown, and green carbs. It's kind of how I break things down in my own head. So your white carbs are your sugars, your white flours, anything to where like that first part of the grains or the molecules of the carb kind of gets broken down, and you're left with like the white part that's left behind. That's your white carbs. Those tend to be the things that will have your pancreas releasing insulin a lot faster. Your body will use it a lot quicker as well. So you're not going to stay full as long. And that's how you kind of get like those real insulin spikes here and there. And then you're going to constantly feel hungry throughout the day. Then you go into your brown carbs, like your potatoes. So things that are a little bit more heavy, for you. They will at least, release the insulin and release the sugars into your blood a lot slower. So you can feel a lot fuller by eating potatoes. But of course, everything within moderation, depending on how your body, breaks down certain foods. And then you have what I call your green carbs, because literally carbs are found in pretty much everything. So the green carbs are like your vegetables. And those are more so of like the fibrous kind of carbs. So that, and that's how you're able to stay fuller longer have better digestion. All that really comes from like your green carbs. So it's like, I don't want you guys to be afraid of hearing the word carbs. It's like, oh, now I have to avoid breads, pastas. Carbs are pretty much found in almost everything. Your breads, of course, your rices, your nuts. Certain milks have carbs in them as well. Fruit, seeds, grains, everything has at least some small portion of carbs within them. But the main point of them is to be able to give your body energy. So, and think of it as like, you want to kind of break things down into the white, brown, and green carbs as well. But then it kind of comes down even more simplified, just simple and complex. Simple is it breaks down the carbs for you a lot faster. So you think simple carbs, think like your bag of chips. Think like your little pastries, think like anything, like any kind of packaged processed foods and your bleached flours. You can pretty much guarantee those are your simple carbs. The things that may taste a lot sweeter, they may, be more fulfilling in the moment, but they really do have a way of, spiking your blood sugar to where you're not going to be, like Deion said, full for a long period of time. So your blood sugar is still going to be here. Your hunger kind of peaks back up, so you eat again. So you're just adding insulin and adding more sugar into your bloodstream because it's not keeping you fuller longer. And then, of course, you have the opposite side of that. You have your more complex carbs. So your vegetables, your potatoes, your whole grains, your seeds, your nuts, all things like that. The things that your body can digest a lot slower. And the whole thing is slow and steady wins this race. You don't want anything that breaks down in your body too rapidly. The whole point is that we don't want to have to eat 7-10 times a day to feel full and satisfied. We want to be able to have a couple of well-placed, well-portioned sized meals throughout our day that we're able to have our nutrients, in our meals, to feel fuller longer, to have a nice variety of foods within our diet. That's the main goal here. So just understanding what carbs do, they provide you energy. And then knowing to kind of look out for certain carbs and understanding how they actually work within your body and how to kind of manipulate the system a little bit. If that kind of makes sense for y'all.
100%. So what I want to do is just bounce a little bit off of what you said and to kind of get more out of the nutrition and get people to realize where it comes into play with working out.
Yeah.
And kind of give a personal experience really quick too. So one thing, for example, like you said, simple carbs, yeah, you definitely want to be mindful of that. And so I think where simple carbs might play a little bit of a okay part, and this is a kind of like niche for very specific like athletes and stuff of that nature that I've noticed through experience, and I've seen recommendations from other experienced coaches as well, and we're talking like like athlete levels, like up there, elite levels. But basically, some of the time, let's say that we didn't have time to get our carbs in before like a workout or whatever the case is, and we need a little something as well. Or sometimes, like for example, I'll be completely like basically dead, no energy. So I will have something that's simple carb. So I'll have like for example a portion of Sour Patches, something of that nature, to get that going as far as my simple carbs, get a little sugar in there, spike it up, give me a little energy. But then at the same time, what people don't realize is it's not even it's more of a thing like if I were to go into the gym with no carbs, you basically have no energy to an extent. To an extent, everybody's different. Because I know people who can train in the AM fasted, no problem. But the thing is what happens, like, for example, somebody that, to say very specific, that are, competing or whatever the case is, and they get to a point to where, let's say, they're doing keto where they have no carbs, there's going to be other ways that they have to get it in. So they'll do salt. But then, like, for example, you'll be curling or whatever the case is, doing certain exercises. And when you have those carbohydrates, it will fill the muscle, like we're saying with glucose, things of that sort. But what happens is when you're flat or you have no carbohydrates, you're in the gym, you're like, bro, like, I just feel like I'm just lagging. I just feel like there's nothing really, no pump or anything. So I want people to just also, like the whole family here in the community, to realize that there's a time and place. Like we said, carb timing is another thing. I know we're getting a little bit more advanced on certain things. I don't want to go too deep, but
Right.
What I always like to tell people to be mindful of is where you're placing your carbs as well too. Because if your
Yeah.
body doesn't have the time to digest it as well, that's another situation. So I know whenever I ask clients, Or I just talk to people in general. I'm like, hey, okay, well, what's your last meal? They'll tell me, oh, I'll have some chicken, I'll have like rice and beans. I'm like, how much? I don't make that face clearly, but I'd be like, well, how much are you eating? Like about 2 cups. I'm like, okay. Now you have to be very mindful because again, your body still has to digest all this as well. As opposed to, how about you take your carbohydrates and place them more before the workout if possible, and after the workout if possible, because those are going to be more of, I don't want to say like the best time, but that's when you're able to utilize your carbohydrates the right way and more efficiently, for lack of better
Yeah.
words. So that's another thing that I think that we have a misconception of just thinking that, oh, as long as we get our carbs in for the whole day, it's fine. Yes, but again, I'm speaking more as of, if we are in a lifestyle of, fitness, and we are going to the gym and things of that sort, try to be very mindful of where you're placing your carbs. So you're not just necessarily sitting on it at the end of the night and then holding on to those carbohydrates and then wonder why when we either wake up bloated, lethargic, heavy, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, and things of that sort.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to tap on that as well too.
And to go off of that, you could also think about doing a thing. Think of it as kind of like carb cycling. So based on how you have your workout set out, throughout the week, you can kind of be mindful when you have your heavier carb loading days. So it's like, we want to do more weight training, more strength, conditioning workouts, and you need that extra energy to get you through the curls or the RDLs or whatever you're doing for that, for that one workout. You may want to eat a little bit of a heavier carb load that particular day, especially before the workout, because that's going to be what's going to carry you through to finishing up that entire session. So that would not be a bad thing for you to do on that, that sort of day for you. But like, on a day we know it's going to be more of a light stretch kind of day, more, sedentary, working at the office. You're not going to be too active that day. Let that be the day where you can actually alternate between your carbs and your fats. So my best practice is to actually have my fats on, like, a more light, not as active kind of day, and leave the carbs for when I know I'm going to be up, moving around, and actually, giving your body time to actually be able to utilize those carbs in the most functional way possible. So that's one like little, hack that you guys can do as well. Either keep your carbs earlier in the day, give your body time to really burn that fuel off, or pick and choose what days you do want to have most of your carbo loaded meals on. And there's more strength or weight training. It's a great days to have your carbs. You're gonna be more sedentary. Maybe do like light, lean vegetables, lean meats, things on that side. That way your body it doesn't have to work as hard to burn the same amount of calories when you're not, already going to be as active for that day.
100%. And I know we're doing a lot of piggybacking right now, but listen, so you hit it right on the nail. I think carb cycling for a lot of people is a really great start because it gives them an idea of realizing, based on their program that they're doing in the gym as of right now, whether it's at home, in the gym, whatever the case is, where and how, like you said, to place those carbs on certain days. Because yeah, I remember those days where it made a lot more sense for me to eat 150, 200, 300 grams of carbs on a leg day or a back day. You get what I'm saying? Because you really want to prioritize your carbs around your larger muscle groups, like you were saying. So if we're doing things like RDLs, if we're doing things like squats, anything that has to do with compound movements, for sure. Chest, yes, to an extent, for sure. But it just really depends on the intensity of that workout as well, too. Because if you're not going to be in there for super, super long, you have to be very mindful of that as well, too. Because I can't tell somebody that comes in for a 30-minute session, like, hey, carb up, you know what I'm saying? Because if we don't really have that much time, that's one thing. But if we have
Yeah.
the time, one, but also we are doing heavy lifts on a 30-minute session, then yes, we definitely want to do that. But I also want to reiterate what you're saying is the fact of beforehand, and the whole point of this, this whole episode of the podcast is that carbs isn't a bad thing, especially if you know what you're doing with them, how to place them, and the type of carbs that works best as far as optimizing your nutrition plan and also your performance in the gym. There's studies that are showing that you having a higher carb intake is actually a lot better for output and performance. And although you still have that high carbohydrate input, you're not necessarily compensating as far as like body fat percentage or You know what I mean? You don't really see that issue because a lot of people tend to be more lean as well too, because again, they're utilizing these carbohydrates the right way. So
Right.
that's one thing I really want people to be mindful of is that even for me, like when I was going through the whole keto puts it, and it depends on the keto coach. The keto coach will let you know, hey, this is the purpose. You know, most coaches don't really want you to go over 25 grams to 30. 30 is like really pushing it. And some will be nice depending on who the person is, 50. But again, it depends on the person's body, because genetically I might be dispositioned a little bit different than you are. So you
Mhm.
might look a lot better with doing 50 carbs, 50 grams of carbs of carbohydrates. But for me, I might look a lot better if I just do 25 to 30. So that's another thing too, is just getting out of that concept of thinking that, you know, you have to have a certain amount of carbs. So having the opportunity, for example, to track your stuff is really important to see, you know, optimally what works best for you and then kind of make those adjustments. So I always tell people don't feel like you have to track your food 24/7, but I always like to get a baseline. So like the analogy
Yeah.
that I would use with people is if you're my doctor and I come to you, I'm like, okay, doc, you know, like, hey, how you doing? Whatever, whatever. And like, yeah, I'm doing well. All right, Deion. So I'm going to prescribe you. I haven't told you what I needed yet. I didn't tell you what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
Didn't even tell
Like,
you what was wrong yet.
how are you going to prescribe me something if you don't even know what's wrong with me? You get what I'm saying?
Right.
So who am I to tell you, you know, vice versa? So I always tell people, get a baseline, see what's going on, and then pay attention to how you feel throughout the week and those days. Pay attention to your mood, you know, all these different things. And then you could take that information and say, all right, cool. On Tuesdays, Thursdays, like we're saying, which are, you know, sedentary days, I don't need that much, you know, that many carbohydrates because I'm not utilizing them the right way. I'm just sitting down. So what's the point of me adding more carbohydrates and feeling heavy and lethargic if I'm not going to utilize them properly? As opposed to the high carbohydrate days, which is usually going to be the days that it's going to be more calories as well too in general. So you really want to be mindful of that and being in that caloric surplus because you're going to be exerting a lot of energy when you're in the gym. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, there's not a misconception of thinking that, hey, I don't want to have too many carbs because you actually can, you know, basically overfill the cup slightly and still be an advantage to you. But again, it depends on the person. So I like to make sure I clarify that too.
Disclaimer, disclaimer. These are not one size fits all journeys. You know, we're gonna
100%.
different, like, you know, fads and topics throughout this podcast. But the main thing for you guys to always keep in mind at the very foundation is that this is not a one size fits all kind of journey. What's good for a person to your left may not work for somebody who's, you know, to your right. So it's like, take, you know, the notes that we're giving you for, like, you know, these various topics on carbs, or, you know, even your mindset tips or your wellness tips, and just kind of like, you know, plug and play, kind of like how, you know, Deion was saying, like, you know, plug and play things, try it out for a week or so, 2 weeks or so, or however long you need to get a good gauge of how your body and how your mind reacts to these certain changes. If it works for you, kudos, keep things pushing, keep things going strong. If it does not, that is fine as well, because you're still, like, you know, we're trying to learn how our bodies function as we go along. So give you guys, you like, you know, give yourselves the grace and the time to really figure out, okay, what works for me? Does keto work for me? Does paleo? Does low carb? Does high fat? Does high protein? Does, you know, figure out what works best for your particular body. But I would say at the very basis, for everybody, your body needs the 3 main things. Carbs probably gonna be number 1. Right after that's gonna be the proteins. After that, fats and the sugars, and then on and so forth and so forth. So definitely don't get too caught up to think that you had to completely cut off carbs in total. You will never catch me. And I doubt you probably will catch me on telling anybody to completely let go of carbs. I'm a carb freak myself, so I can't even tell myself to do that. So I'm not gonna tell you all to do the same thing. It's all about being mindful of when you're actually hungry, being mindful of when you're just seeing food and then making yourself hungry. Be mindful of that. Be mindful of your portion sizes. Be mindful of what certain foods have certain reactions, like how with me eating certain sugars makes me break out. If I know if I avoid certain things, I won't have these, you know, these certain problems. Whether you can't have milk, and for those out there who cannot eat milk and still do it anyway, I need y'all to get it together. That's a little side note. Y'all have to stop doing that. Just find the non-dairy option. But just honestly, like, figure out what really works for yourself. And I'm trying to think, how long can this episode really be? I think it's like a real, just short, sweet, to the point kind of episode, because it's honestly just comes down to, you guys, that your body needs carbs. Carbs are not the devil. They're not the devil. They're not at all. So I think at that point, so I'm gonna let Deion take it from here, honestly.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, I think you wrapped it up very well. I think the other thing that I'd like to, say as a disclaimer is also consult with your doctor, your physician, and or whether it's a licensed dietitian or whatever, somebody that has that additional knowledge. And what I always like to tell everybody with anything that we say, especially when it comes to nutrition, the working out and things of that nature, fact check us. You know what I mean? Like, I always tell people, if you find something new or if there's something else that you notice, reach out to us and let us know, and we can discuss that as well too. But again, at the end of the day, just being very mindful. And lastly, what I would say is, the only time, if in the event that I would tell somebody to not have carbs, is if it's a medical situation. And this is why, again, we want to reach out to your doctor. Because again, when we're talking about like insulin resistance and things of that nature, a lot of things can be reversed if you're mindful of what caused it, and your doctor's going to tell you the same thing. So again, PCOS and insulin resistance in general can be reversed if you're very mindful of the type of foods and what you're putting into your body. And that's with anything. So like you said, if you're lactose intolerant, I know it's not necessarily carbs, a majority of people are lactose intolerant. You get what I'm saying? So the whole concept of, if it's a cattle or wherever you're getting this milk from, think about who actually consumes the milk. It's not humans. You get what I'm saying? So it's not us, basically. It's not us. So you have to be very mindful of that and wonder why your skin breaks out, or you know what I mean? So there's levels to it. But ultimately, that's what I wanted to end on, just making sure that you do always consult with your doctor. Okay. But other than that, I think it's pretty short. And like we always tell everybody, we greatly appreciate you all joining into the podcast. If you could like, share, comment, subscribe. And we're going to always have Joy Monique's information at the bottom as well, too, if you want to reach out to her. She's going to be on Facebook, IG, same thing on my end. And you guys are more than welcome to drop any questions that you have below. We're also going to be on IG as well, too, doing some live. So y'all stay tuned, and we're going to catch up with y'all.
Stay tuned for that.
All right, y'all have a good one.
All right, y'all. Good night.